I recall the moment I genuinely grasped the concept of gaining insights from an adversary. It didn't happen in any competitive arena or on a film set. It wasn't even during a confrontation. It occurred in a modest eatery in Oakland back in 1967 as I sat across from an individual who had dedicated months to dismantling everything I had established. His name was Wong Jackman, and he had just issued a challenge for a duel that would either affirm my teaching techniques or terminate my profession in America permanently. But there's something about that day that remained unknown to everyone, something I never disclosed to journalists or biographers. As I sat there, absorbing his words, observing his gaze, and analyzing his stance, I realized something significant. This individual, my most vocal detractor and fiercest rival, was about to impart more knowledge about myself than any supportive pupil, encouraging companion, or positive evaluation ever could. In that instant of pure adversity and conflict, I uncovered a truth that would not only reshape my martial arts, but also my entire perspective on life. A sagacious individual can acquire more knowledge from adversaries than a foolish one from companions. These are not merely words, but a plan for change and a path to wisdom that many never find because they spend their lives evading rather than welcoming opposition. You sense it now, don't you? That resistance in your chest when I mention embracing your foes. That inner voice saying, "But they wish to harm me, to see me fail," and you're correct. But that's precisely why they're more precious than any ally could be. Your adversaries reveal your weaknesses with exact precision, and your friends, even the most loyal ones, often conceal these truths behind kindness and solace. Let me transport you back to that eatery, to the moment when everything I believed I knew about learning was overturned. Wong Jackman wasn't just questioning my combat skills. He was challenging my right to instruct non-Chinese students, my techniques, and my very presence in America. Every word he uttered was intended to cut deep, to find my insecurities and exploit them. And he succeeded. Sitting there, I felt every doubt I had ever suppressed come rushing back. Was I skilled enough? Was I qualified? Was I dishonoring my traditions? But then something changed. Instead of defending myself or counterattacking, I began to listen differently. I started to hear not just his words, but the fears behind them, the traditions he was desperately trying to uphold, and the changes he was terrified of accepting. And in understanding his position, I began to comprehend my own more clearly than ever before. This is the first lesson your enemies teach you that friends cannot. They compel you to scrutinize your foundations. When someone who truly opposes you challenges your beliefs, methods, or very identity, you cannot rely on superficial confidence. And you must delve deep and ask yourself the tough questions. Is what I believe truly accurate? Are my methods genuinely effective? Am I living authentically? Or am I merely playing a role? Your friends, bless them, love you too much to put you through this kind of examination. Ihki, they see you struggling and want to comfort you, see you doubting and want to reassure you. But your enemies, they will strip away every comfortable illusion, every false assumption, and every piece of borrowed confidence until you're left with nothing but the raw truth of who you are and what you're truly capable of. I fought Wong Jackman that day, and I emerged victorious. But the real triumph wasn't in the physical confrontation. The real victory was in what he compelled me to discover about myself in the weeks leading up to that fight. Every criticism he made and every doubt he planted became a point of investigation. I didn't just train my body harder. I examined every technique, principle, and belief I held about martial arts and myself. His criticism, harsh as it was, pushed me to develop more nuanced acting skills and bring more emotional depth to my physical performances. Years later, after Enter the Dragon, that same critic wrote a review calling my final performance a masterpiece of physical and emotional expression. But I never forgot that his earlier criticism had been part of the journey to that masterpiece. My enemy had become my teacher without either of us fully realizing it. This is the third lesson. Enemies teach us that friends cannot. They accelerate our development. Friends often accept us as we are, which is beautiful and necessary for our emotional well-being. But enemies refuse to accept us as we are. They demand that we become better, stronger, and more authentic. They won't let us hide behind our current limitations. By forcing you to address your weaknesses, pushing you to develop new strengths, and making you prove yourself over and over again, they contribute to your growth in ways they never intended. But let me be clear about something crucial. Learning from enemies is not the same as seeking out enemies or creating unnecessary conflict. You don't need to go looking for opposition. Life provides plenty of it naturally. The key is to change your relationship with the opposition that already exists in your life. Instead of seeing critics as obstacles to overcome, see them as information to process. Instead of seeing competitors as threats to eliminate, see them as benchmarks to surpass. Instead of seeing opposition as something to endure, see it as something to utilize. See it as something to utilize. This shift in perspective changes everything. When you stop fighting against opposition and start learning from it, you transform every enemy into a teacher, every criticism into a lesson, and every challenge into an opportunity for growth. The fifth lesson enemies teach us is about resilience. Friends cushion your falls, which is wonderful for emotional healing, but not always optimal for building strength. Enemies knock you down and expect you to get up on your own. This forced self-reliance develops a kind of inner strength that cannot be built any other way. Every time someone told me I would fail, tried to sabotage my progress, or wrote me off as a novelty or a fluke, I had to dig deeper into my own resources. I had to find strength I didn't know I had, develop skills I hadn't thought I needed, and discover reserves of determination that surprised even me. Your friends will carry you when you're weak. Your enemies will force you to become strong enough to carry yourself. Both are valuable, but only one creates lasting inner power. I want to share with you now a practice that transformed how I dealt with opposition throughout my life. I call it the enemy audit. Once a month, I would sit down and honestly assess who was opposing me and why. Not to plan revenge or fuel resentment, but to extract maximum learning from each source of opposition. For each person or group opposing me, I would write down 3 things: what they were specifically criticizing about my approach, what they might be afraid of in my success, and what their opposition was revealing about areas where I could improve. This process turned every enemy into a consultant and every attack into a diagnostic tool. Try this practice yourself. Think about the people in your life who challenge you, criticize you, or oppose your goals. Instead of just feeling frustrated by them, study them. Study them. What patterns do you notice in their criticisms? What weaknesses do they consistently identify? What do their attacks reveal about your blind spots? You'll probably discover that your enemies know you better than you think. They've been studying you, analyzing you, and looking for ways to challenge you. Why not benefit from all that research? Why not use their observations to accelerate your own development? The sixth lesson enemies teach us is about authenticity. Friends often accept whatever version of yourself you present to them. They're invested in maintaining harmony and keeping relationships comfortable, but enemies have no such investment. They will call out inconsistencies, challenge pretenses, and force you to defend or abandon positions that aren't genuine yours. This process, uncomfortable as it is, helps you discover what you truly believe versus what you think you should believe. It helps you identify which of your convictions are real and which are borrowed. It strips away the performances and reveals the authentic person underneath. When martial arts traditionalists attacked my innovations, they forced me to articulate exactly why I believed change was necessary. I couldn't just say because it feels right or because it's modern. I had to develop a deep, logical, and philosophical foundation for my approach. Their opposition made my authentic beliefs stronger by forcing me to defend them with more than just instinct. When Hollywood executives questioned my leading man potential, they forced me to define for myself what kind of performer I really wanted to be. Not what was safe or commercially viable, but what was authentic to my vision. Their resistance helped me clarify my artistic identity in ways that encouragement alone never could have. Your enemies won't let you hide behind false personas or borrowed beliefs. They demand that you show up as your real self, with real convictions, real strength, and real authenticity. This is terrifying, but ultimately liberating. Now, let me address the question I know you're thinking. How do you learn from enemies without becoming bitter, without losing your compassion, and without turning into the very thing you oppose? This is perhaps the most important aspect of this entire philosophy. The secret is to maintain what I call warrior compassion. You recognize that your enemies are usually not evil people, just individuals operating from fear, insecurity, or limited understanding. Their opposition often says more about their own struggles than about your worth. When you understand this, you can extract the valuable lessons from their challenges without absorbing their negativity. I learned to see my enemies as unconscious teachers. They didn't intend to help me grow, but their opposition forced growth anyway. This perspective allowed me to feel grateful for the lessons while maintaining boundaries against the malice. Instead, explore their perspective. What might they be seeing that you're missing? What might their opposition reveal about areas for growth? As you develop this skill with minor oppositions, you'll find yourself better equipped to handle major ones. You'll discover that you can remain centered and analytical even under significant attack. You'll learn to mine wisdom from the most unlikely sources. The ninth lesson enemies teach us is about innovation. Friends often encourage you to stick with what works what's safe and what's proven. But enemies challenge your current method so directly that they force you to innovate, find new approaches, and break new ground. Every innovation in my martial arts came from someone challenging the adequacy of my current methods. When boxers said my punches weren't fast enough, I developed new training methods that increased hand speed beyond what traditional techniques could achieve. When wrestlers said my ground game was weak, I studied and integrated grappling techniques that traditional martial arts had ignored. When film directors said my action scenes looked fake, I pioneered new approaches to filming martial arts that brought unprecedented realism to the screen. When critics said my philosophy was simplistic, I deepened my understanding and developed more sophisticated ways of expressing complex ideas. Your enemies don't just point out current weaknesses. They inadvertently map out your future innovations. The very things they say you can't do become the things you must learn to do. The very limitations they identify become the barriers you must break through. This is why a wise person actually appreciates quality opposition, not malicious personal attacks, but intelligent, well-informed criticism. Such opposition accelerates development in ways that encouragement alone never could. The 10th and final lesson is perhaps the most profound. Enemies teach us about our own capacity for transformation. Friends love us as we are, which is beautiful but sometimes limiting. They're invested in maintaining the version of you they know and care about. But enemies have no such investment. They challenge not just your actions, but your identity itself. This identity challenge, painful as it is, creates space for growth that wouldn't otherwise exist. When someone says you're not the kind of person who could ever achieve that, they're inadvertently giving you permission to become a different kind of person. And when someone says, people like you don't belong in this arena, they're challenging you to redefine what people like you are capable of. Every major transformation in my life came from someone telling me what I couldn't do, couldn't be, and couldn't achieve. These limitations meant to constrain me became launching points for transcendence. But here's the crucial point about transformation through opposition. It only works if you maintain your core values while evolving your capabilities. You don't become a different person to spite your enemies. You become a more complete version of yourself by refusing to accept their limitations. When martial arts traditionalists said, I was betraying Chinese culture, I didn't abandon my respect for tradition. I developed a deeper understanding of what was truly valuable in tradition versus what was merely habitual. When Hollywood executives said I needed to be less Chinese to succeed in America, I didn't try to become something I wasn't. I found ways to express my authentic self in language and methods that broader audiences could appreciate. The transformation that comes from enemy pressure isn't about becoming someone else. It's about becoming more fully yourself than you thought possible. Now, as we near the end of our journey together, I want to leave you with a challenge, a way to begin implementing this wisdom immediately. For the next 30 days, I want you to practice what I call enemy appreciation. This doesn't mean you have to like your enemies or invite them for dinner. It means you approach every criticism, opposition, and challenge with one simple question. What can this teach me? When someone cuts you off in traffic, instead of just feeling angry, ask what this might teach you about patience or defensive driving. When a colleague criticizes your work, instead of just feeling defensive, ask what this might reveal about communication or skill development. When a competitor seems to be gaining ground on you, instead of just feeling threatened, ask what this might teach you about innovation or effort. Start small, start simple, but start. Begin to see opposition as information rather than attack, criticism as data rather than insult, and enemies as unconscious consultants rather than threats to be eliminated. As you develop this perspective, you'll notice something remarkable happening. You'll become less defensive and more curious, less reactive and more responsive, and less threatened by opposition and more energized by it. You'll discover that the very people who seem to be obstacles to your success are often the ones providing the most valuable guidance for achieving it, You'll realize that your enemies, in their attempts to limit you, are actually showing you exactly where you need to grow. Remember that wisdom comes not from having all the answers, but from asking better questions. And the best questions often come from the most uncomfortable sources. Your friends will ask you comfortable questions that confirm what you already believe. Your enemies will ask you uncomfortable questions that force you to examine what you think you know. A wise person can learn more from enemies than a fool from friends because wisdom requires discomfort, challenge, and the courage to face unpleasant truths. Friends, in their kindness, often shield us from these necessary difficulties. Enemies, in their opposition, deliver them with surgical precision. But perhaps the most important truth I can leave you with is this. The greatest enemy you'll ever face, the one with the most to teach you, the one whose opposition will serve you best, is not outside you at all. It's the voice inside your own head that says you're not good enough, not ready enough, and not worthy enough to achieve your dreams. This internal enemy knows all your weaknesses, fears, and past failures. It opposes you with intimate knowledge of exactly how to discourage you most effectively. But if you can learn to treat even this enemy as a teacher, if you can extract wisdom from your own self-doubt, then you will have mastered the art of learning from opposition at its highest level. Your internal critic will show you exactly where you need to grow. Your self-doubt will reveal exactly what you need to prove to yourself. Your fear will map out exactly where you need to find courage. The path forward is clear. Stop running from opposition and start learning from opposition and start learning from it. Stop fighting your enemies and start studying them. Stop seeing criticism as an attack and start seeing it as intelligence gathering. Your enemies are waiting to teach you. Your opposition is ready to serve you. Your challenges are prepared to strengthen you. The only question is whether you're ready to become wise enough to learn from them. The choice, as always, is yours. But remember, a wise person can learn more from enemies than a fool from friends. Which will you choose to be?